Hello. Wait. The pressure is on me.
Hi, folks. Just want to give everybody a second to all get here. You come over here.
I think you need to put the volume. You have to mute Jesse's sound.
Thank you.
Are they in?
Yeah, we're just gonna let folks come in.
Hello. Hi, y'all. Can they talk to?
Can I hear you?
You have to give them permission to talk.
How do you do that?
Oh, well, the thing is, we want people to raise their hands because it's gonna be a lot, right?
So I'm gonna go on the next
Or let
slide.
me see if I can allow to talk. I'm gonna allow I'm gonna take it off. Yeah. So that way people can ask questions.
Hi, y'all. Welcome. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, well, Lord, I'm opening it up for everybody.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for being here. We're going to start momentarily.
I think Marbella's has a hand up.
I see Marvelous. Let me see. Marvelous, I made you, you're able to speak. Okay, I'm going to mute it. Marcel, you're able to say something. Hi.
Hey there. What's up?
Hi, I just want to say thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem.
You had your hand up, so I just wanted to see what was going on. But no, thank you for being here. And we're going to start momentarily.
Okay, all good. I'll be waiting.
Okay, perfect. Yes, so we're letting folks come in and just a little bit of house rules. If you guys want to say something, you guys are more than able to just to raise your hand and I will unmute. I will unmute your let me perfect. What time do we have?
It is 5:37, so let's start.
Okay, perfect. So we're
3 minutes. It's 5:40. Make sure if anybody else wants to log in.
all
We're at
right.
14:15 now.
Allowed to talk. Perfect.
No, don't pretend you're leaving it.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I think someone called Francois has their hand up.
Francois, let me see.
Oh, I took it down.
Okay. Okay, we unmuted everybody that's joining us, so that way they have more they have permission to speak.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm Francois. Good evening.
Hi, Francois.
Hi.
Hi. I just have a quick question. So I'm going to keep it on mute while, of course, you're speaking, so my background doesn't interrupt. But do we raise our hand or do we go to the chat?
You can put question. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
You can use both. You can use either
Okay.
raise your hand if you want to just say your question, but if you prefer to write it out, you can also write it on the chat, and we'll keep an eye on the chat as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
And we're just going to go ahead and start here in 1 more minute to let folks roll in.
Move this thing out of
Okay, see.
my way.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Let me see here. Andrea, can you, okay, perfect. We're just gonna go ahead and just set some ground rules. This is a place where everybody's learning, so there ain't no dumb questions here. We want to thank each and every one of you that's here attending tonight. This is something that's hitting the Black communities, especially the Black families in our communities really hard. So just thanking Andrea Figueroa. Excuse us. Where did it go? Sorry about that.
Press X right there. Right there.
Whose phone is that at?
What are this?
Sorry, somebody.
No, don't look at it.
Marvelous.
Is Marvelous?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
I was on mute.
Yeah, I need to mute it. Okay. Okay. So sorry about that. I just want to thank each and every one of you guys that are here tonight, because you guys could be anywhere and you guys are here. And I would like to thank our partner, Andrea Figueroa, for spending this time to give us this information and helping us, show up for this crisis. So I want to thank you, and I'll go ahead and let you start.
Thank you. I'm just gonna go back. So my name is Andrea Figueroa. I'm the DOPE project manager, and we just the DOPE project is a San Francisco-based project where we do overdose prevention. We do trainings on how to respond to overdoses and harm reduction, and also we do distribute naloxone, which is sort of like a medication that can help people in the community respond to an overdose. And I'm going to talk about all of that as well. And I think the purpose of today is just sort of to make a space for us to talk about like what is happening, what is fentanyl, how does it work, how does it affect in the community, and also like how do we respond to that. So this is just a little Zoom housekeeping. So you can raise your hand if you have a question. You all have a lot to share, so please do not hesitate to ask questions. A little bit about my background, so it's like I am not from San Francisco, but I am born in, I used to work as a nurse in Canada at a supervised injection site. I've responded to like hundreds of overdoses. I have parents who've used drugs in the past. I am in a community and I love people who use drugs. So that's been my experience with drug use, and also with people who use drugs. And part of what I have seen is that when I was in Canada, I saw the drug supply shift drastically from like almost no fentanyl to fentanyl and things are a little bit stronger. They're still not here in the Bay. So I can answer quite a bit of questions about that. But I do want to say that we all are experts in our experiences, so please share what you need to share. And if you have any accessibility needs, just please let us know in the chat. Like if you need me to speak slower, faster. Also, if you're not clear about something I'm saying, just please go ahead and bring it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. So today we're just gonna, the first part of this sort of like discussion is gonna be, I'm gonna just quickly talk about what is happening in San Francisco, and a bit about what is harm reduction. So like we're using this term, what does it mean? And then I'm gonna go over like what is fentanyl, like what are the most common myths around fentanyl, what it is. And then I'm gonna talk about how to respond to it very quickly. And then at the end, we're gonna have like a space for you all to ask questions if you haven't already. If you have anything you're not clear about, and then I'm going to pass it on to the wellness team, and they'll take over the second part. So what is harm reduction? So before I even start with talking about harm reduction, I want to talk about something that just happened. So the sort of the San Francisco, the coroner, so the person who deals with all the bodies of San Francisco, the people who died, just released a report with the number of overdoses, accidental overdoses, so people who died of overdoses in San Francisco since for 2020. And the chart that you're seeing on the screen right now is sort of looking at like since 2017, we had like 200 people who were dying from overdoses, and then in 2022 it's been 620. You're gonna see like a little spike in 2020, which has to do with the pandemic, but also one of the positive things, even though it's 600 people who died, which is around 2 people per day, is that we're one of the only cities in the whole country in the United States where the number of overdose deaths has gone down. Every single city in North America, the numbers go up, which is a lot to do with community responses, with how we care for each other in community. Because you can also see the red line is like the number of overdose reversals. So these are community members, people who use drugs in the streets, family members who are responding to overdoses so people don't die. And that's something that San Francisco does have. Like we have a very good, solid harm reduction community. We also have a lot of naloxone, which is like the medication that you use to reverse overdoses. So just like a quick run of that. And the thing that I think is relevant for here and that it keeps happening is that if you look at this chart very quickly, it looks at the number of people who died based on race and ethnicity and who died from overdoses versus the population in San Francisco, the total population. And you see that Black people, of all of the deaths, of all of the accidental overdose deaths, 28% of them were Black, but only 5.7% of the population is Black. It means that like compared to how many people, Black people are in San Francisco, there's more of them dying of overdoses than if you compare the population size compared to any other race. And that is like something that keeps happening every year since like 2020, and it keeps sort of the same thing where like they're dying at higher numbers proportionally than other races. And that's something to think about in terms of like, okay, so this is happening in the Black community. There has to be a community response to this, right? Because it has to be coming from our own spaces as well. It also has to do with the way that like the laws happen, the way that like racism and marginalization happens in San Francisco, and how like the people who are the most affected are Black people. So what is harm reduction? So harm reduction is it's an approach to life in general. Like it came from sort of like people who use drugs, but it's basically like a set of practices that the goal is to reduce the negative consequences. So we understand that if people are using drugs, they're going to use drugs. You know, like people need to be ready to create change in their life if they want to stop using drugs. Some people might never want to stop. But how do we prevent the negative consequences of people dying, getting infections, things like that are a lot of the time a result not just of the drug use, but also of the sort of the other issues that are in play, that people don't have homes, that people don't have food, water, that they're not getting mental health care, that they don't have the community they need to get to give them the support they need. Because that's added things that come to drug use. Like if someone is able to go home at night and have a bed and food and doesn't have to be sleeping on the streets or having slept for 4 days because they cannot sleep on the streets and leave their stuff alone, those will all affect how the negative consequences. And one of the things that harm reduction sort of has done is with people who use drugs is that it's sort of something that has based itself on social justice, on the idea that we all deserve dignity, that we all deserve autonomy. Yes, in the Q&A, people can ask any kind of questions. And that everything that we do is sort of understand that we're trying to reduce risk. And we do that every day. Like even if you think about getting a car is a metal can that can kill us. More people will die from car crashes than they will die from overdoses. And we use seatbelts to protect ourselves, right? Like that's a way that we developed to put on a seatbelt so we can protect ourselves. That's like a way of doing harm reduction. if you go out for a party and you're drinking, you drink water, right? Because you don't want to be hungover the next morning. That's another way, because you're still drinking. Alcohol is risky, but you're trying to reduce the risk by drinking water, for example, or taking an Advil or Tylenol when you get home, so you don't have a headache in the morning. And that is what's harm reduction at the end of the day. And with people who use drugs, what we're doing is we're being like things like, oh, people are going to be injecting drugs, and we've seen from experience and from like studies and science that when people use drugs, and for example, they inject drugs and they're sharing needles, there's a higher chance of them giving each other different diseases, like HIV or hepatitis. So one of the ideas was like, okay, let's give people each a clean syringe. So if they're going to be putting something into their blood, they're going to do it in a way that it won't cause them like an illness that could kill them or an infection. And that's sort of the approach of harm reduction. The other thing is that it's about respecting, it's about basically like the statement is like for us by us, which means that it's about respecting what people who use drugs want and are asking for. Harm reduction has been a movement in North America, around the world, that has been led by people who use drugs. This is about what they need and what they're asking. And sometimes it's not one thing, right? It's not a universal thing that happens or a one way to do things. Each people needs different things. And it's about respecting what those needs are and working with people who use drugs to respect what they need. And sometimes some people are going to need, they don't want to use drugs anymore. Great. And sometimes people are going to want to still use drugs and be safe. Let's support that. And that's sort of what harm reduction is. That's sort of our goal. And with the appearance of fentanyl in the supply right now, and with opiates in the supply, we're seeing a lot more that the negative consequence of drug use is death. And we need to like, how do we stop that? Because one of the things that happens when there's a drug supply that the people are getting their drugs from the street, they're not knowing what they're getting, and it can be mixed with a lot of things that they don't even know about. They can be very dangerous for the body. They can cause a lot of illness. And if people are dependent on the drug, they don't really have much of a choice, because until they choose to stop using and get treatment, which takes a long time, and like any change, I recently read the statistics that you need 7 tries. Like it takes 7 times trying something for it to actually succeed. And the same thing happens when people are trying to stop use, if they choose to stop use. And some people would never want to do that. And then, but it doesn't mean they deserve to die. This is so I sort of mentioned this briefly about like, when we think about people who use drugs and the use of drugs, there's usually like a continuum of drug use. Like some people would never use drugs at all. So like that's usually what we hear the most: abstinence, don't do it, just don't do it. But the reality is people are going to do it. Like some people will, some people would never. So there's some people who use it once in a while, so like experientially, or like just to try something, or like in certain situations, like at a party. There's some people who only do it in social spaces, so then they're able to do it alone. They might use it in other time. Then there's things like regular use, and this can be people who rely on a medication, for example, or like all of the things that happen with opiates is that people were taking it for pain, but opiates are extremely like, they cause a lot of dependency, which means that people end up needing to use it every day. So that's like regular use. And a lot of people can use drugs every day and manage their use and be okay, and have jobs and live their lives. And but that requires sort of like that what you're using is safe also, right? It's like you're actually getting what you're asking. Then there's the people who use it for ritual drinking, so they'll use like a lot one time, like once every 3 months. Then there's the people who do it habitually, so they're like several times a day, once a day. And then there's the chaotic persistent, which is like when people use it, like cannot not use it. Like they have to be high or using the drug at every moment. And it's also called chaotic because sometimes that can lead to chaotic use, which like people just lose control of how much they're using. And not everyone who uses drugs they might go back and forth in this continuum. They might just like sometimes be less social, and then it'll move to chaotic, and then it'll go back to like something's only once in a while. But this is just to say that like drug use is not one thing, and it changes. So what are the things that when we think about harm reduction, we talk about principles of harm reduction. We have certain principles that we sort of like that the harm reduction community has developed, and one of them is health and dignity. It's the idea that every person deserves dignity, and every person deserves health. And that's why a lot of the approaches of harm reduction that have to do with health, they have to do with the idea that when we're giving people, for example, clean needles, it's a way for people to not be able to transmit to each other certain diseases, like decrease the amount of HIV gets transmitted, and decrease the amount of like hepatitis C, for example, for people not to get infections as well. Also, one thing about, like, for example, syringe use is that if you use them more than once, you cause more damage to your skin, and can create more infections as well. Things like condoms, it's another harm reduction tool, right? Like, the idea is like, if you don't have sex, you're not going to get any infections, but if you do have sex, you will. Oh yes, do you want me to go back to the one about the continuum of drug use? I'm going to go back. Oh, no. There we go. So this is the continuum of drug use. This is the one you're talking about, Marvella? I can also share the screen with everyone if people are interested. Okay. The next that we have is participant center services, which is something that Baker T does also, which is the idea that we are centering the people who need the services, right? We're not centering politicians, we're not centering like government officials, we're not centering like businesses, we're centering the people who are using drugs. And that means that we're centering what their needs are and what they're asking, right? Like that's one of the things about harm reduction, and you center the needs of the people. So it's like by us, for us. That you involve participants, that you ask for their input, that they're part of decision making, that they're part of what is needed in the community, because they are the ones who know best. They're the ones who know what their experiences are like and what is happening. And as well, that you give them autonomy to decide for themselves. Like, people will decide when they're ready to do whatever, right? But you have to give them the freedom to be able to decide. You're not telling someone, we're going to do this for you and tell you what to do. Because we all have different experiences and the reasons why people use. Then we talk about sociocultural factors. And this is understand that harm reduction is also based on the idea that we understand that there's many factors that come into play that have to do with our backgrounds, with our race, ethnicity, gender, with our class as well, and what we have access to. That those are things that actually do have an impact in drug use, right? If someone doesn't have a home, if someone doesn't have a job, if someone doesn't have access to community, if someone is from a marginalized Black, Latinx, Indigenous population, they're treated very differently than someone who's white. And that's something that is a reality with people use drugs as well, like in the same way. And those are factors that you have to think about when you think about harm reduction, like that people don't exist in a vacuum, even when they use drugs. And the last thing is that we talk about being pragmatic and real, that yes, we wish we live in a society where this didn't happen. We wish we live in a society where things were different, but that's not the reality. The reality is that we live here now and when people are dying. The reality is that this is something that is happening, that people need things practically, that they need to survive. And there's bigger things at play that are not about individual morality or the person, that have to do with the bigger society, that if we focus on that, which is important, and not think about the practical needs that people have, we're like ignoring the person at the end of the day. Any questions?
Hi, Andrea. It's Jessie.
Yeah. Hi, Jessie.
Hi. Can you explain more about the Black deaths?
Yes.
When it comes to fentanyl? And also too, I kind of wanted you to elaborate a little bit on how people are using fentanyl to cut regular drugs like cocaine or mix it in other things that people use, and how a lot of accidental deaths are going on, because some of these deaths people aren't even knowing, and then they're going to somebody that they might trust, and just for the sake of $1, they're using cheaper products to cut it, and then now it's somebody's life that's gone.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide also. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Black death specifically first. So I'm going to go back. So this slide is the one that talks about Black death. So historically, and this is like a bigger picture thing, people who use drugs, the people who have been the most marginalized are Black people. The war on drugs have been targeted to Black people. We know this from the 80s, from when people were using crack. We know this from like other things, from like currently even with fentanyl. Like most of the time, the people who are dying the most in proportion, right? Like this is like, if you look at the numbers, there's more white people dying. But if you look at how many Black people are in the city versus how many people are dying, it's always going to be more Black people. And this has been going on for years.
Do you know why it happens to be like that though? Because it seems like every time there's something big going on, Black people are the first to get it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like even when the pandemic happened, like it was reported that more people that were Black were dying. So what's going on with that?
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with systemic violence towards Black people. Like this, the United States is a country that is built in, has a history of slavery, has a history of marginalization of Black people. And that is still something that even with everything is still happening today. So when you think about like healthcare, basic healthcare, right? Until very recently, doctors believed that Black women didn't feel pain. So they wouldn't give them pain medication, which is not true. And those are things that are still like right now we're working on trying to dismantle and destroy, but it doesn't mean that it's not those prevalent ideas of racism that still exist, and they exist with the police force. They also exist with housing, like who gets access to housing, who's getting like evicted from houses, who's getting like how neighbors are getting gentrified. Like that has to do with like access to wealth, right? San Francisco, so many people have been evicted from their homes because they cannot afford rent. They end up on the street, and then and that might be one of the reasons they're using drugs. It might be because there's like lack of mental health services that are directly targeted to people who are Black. And it might be also because like, so it's part of like, it's not just about drug treatment, but it's also about like the fact that even people do choose to use drugs because people from many races are using drugs. There's no safety mechanisms to make sure they're okay. And another thing that is happening a lot, and this has to do with the fact that like, there's also a lot of stigma, and that's internalized stigma and also like external stigma in communities. Like for example, I know the Latinx community is very religious, a lot of the folks, so folks don't want to talk about drug use in those communities. And when people are isolated, that's when people die. Because you cannot reverse an overdose on yourself. You need to do it to someone else. You need to be in contact with people. And that gets really hard when you're not talking about it, when people don't know that it's happening. And yeah.
Sorry. We had a question from Lynette. It said, would you say that Black people are more vulnerable because they rely on illicit drug supplies, making them more at high risk, and lack of access to healthcare and drug treatments over Caucasians that may be able to get better drugs?
Yeah.
Good question.
That is true. So when you think about healthcare in the United States, it's privatized. You need to have like healthcare to be able to access things. And a lot of the times in the United States, a lot of the people who are dying from an illicit supply, so from like a street supply, you're getting a lot of things that you might not know. And then if you get like a prescription for a drug, you can get like Percocets or like oxycodone from a doctor. And a lot of them are going to be the people who have resources and tend to be white in a lot of spaces, in a lot of communities. And that will definitely mean like they're going to have better access to certain drugs that are not mixed. It does not mean that there's no death with white people. Like people can still overdose from using like a prescribed medication, but there's a higher chance if you're using a supply that you don't know what's in it. So I'm gonna go back to, so I had a question, but I think, I don't know if people wanna, instead of wanting just to like ask you all to talk to each other about like what are you already doing in your life? How are you already doing harm reduction in your work? And that can be your personal life, your family, your like work, and like where you go to work every day. And I was gonna ask Lisa if you can split people up into
Let them drop it in the chat.
No, if they can, we can do like breakout rooms.
I'm sorry, repeat that.
Breakout rooms.
Oh, yes. I'll go ahead and start the breakout rooms now.
Thank you. So the question is how you're already doing harm reduction in your work.
Nobody put me in a breakout room. I'm just kind of right here.
No, I'm still here too. I think we're still waiting to be put in breakout rooms.
I'd put something in the.
Hi, guys. We're just trying to figure out how to do the breakout room. So just give us a few minutes.
Okay, no problem there. Thank you, Jazz.
Thank
Back-
you.
How come we can't see everyone else?
Because the screen is being shared with the webinar. And so I believe that is.
Sorry.
But
No worries.
I see
So let me see.
I see you, Miss. I see you, Paulette. Give us 1 second here.
Can
Okay,
you see?
we might.
Oh, there
maybe,
I am. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe what we'll do is because I think we're having a bit of a hard time with the breakout rooms. What I'm going to ask people is like if people want to just share by raising their hands or just like you can start speaking about if you want to share a couple of things. We might not get to everyone, but if you want to share, that'd be great. Yeah, Marvelous. I think you raised your
Okay,
hand.
this is my experience in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So I go to the doctors. You have a toothache. I mean, it takes an act of God to get some a prescription type drug, for example, a narco or just a codeine. And then back some time, I was heavily injured, and I deal with chronic arthritis, like real stuff, right? And sometimes things are hard. So I got at my doctor, and I don't have any history of like opioids or none of this stuff, like literally. And they'll give me Motrin, and I'll ask for something because sometimes I can't even walk because my ankle was reconstructed. I mean, it's real bad, a lot of stuff, right? Won't go into the details, but I spoke to her. She acted like she got to get a act signed by Congress to get something to alleviate pain. However, it seems like everybody I know is going to doctors with getting subscriptions, lying to them, saying that either a reseller or a person who's an addict. And I just think that the hospitals and all these people got this thing wrong, which would lead me, if I had to, I'm not using me as an example, but just highlighting, how about if I want to get some drugs, thinking that the drugs on the street is legit and I'll get fentanyl. So I think that the stoppage of the doctors prescribing real, for real pain is causing people who are in real pain to go get some drugs off the street.
Yeah.
So what are we doing towards that? Because it seems to me like these doctors act like it's out of their hands now. Like they have to get, these are doctors at Kaiser. Like they act like they can't write opioid prescriptions for legit stuff. And we're not even talking about some 30, the big time stuff. I'm talking about small codeines or Vicodin, old school regular stuff for real pain.
So this is something that came out of the sort of like big when opiates started showing up in the supply. So when you think about like there's like TV shows now about it and everything, where doctors were giving up opiates to people like freely without talking about the risk or the consequences that could happen, that people can get very dependent on them, that they can end up using them every day, that it's really hard to quit using opiates. And doctors were giving them so freely that that's how a lot of people end up becoming dependent on it. And then suddenly people are dying, right? And then what did the governments do? They tried to go the opposite direction, just not give any out. But what happened to all the people who were using already, who started by using from doctors? They ended up having to find it somewhere else, right? And now what is happening is that they're not even giving out when people actually do have pain. Like because they're like so scared in the other. extreme. And a lot of those bigger changes need to happen with policy.
Well, something needs to happen with that because a lot of people be in legitimate pain, and you could just, I mean, the doctor knows their patient. I've been with this doctor over a year. You know, whatever they have to go through, other than just telling the person absolutely no, is ridiculous. Especially if this is your primary caretaker. You know, they've brought you along, through your health. It's just, I just feel that in itself causes people to have to go to the street, and you'll have a person who may just casually buy some painkillers and die because they are in real pain, and the doctors didn't give. Yeah, that's just a thought.
No, it does happen a lot, and that's something I'm going to talk in the next slides about, like what is fentanyl and like how it became what it is today. And I think there's also something that's very true about, like, there's a lot of racism in the healthcare system. Like, doctors are like, the way that the education happens with medical students, with like nurses, the racism is real. Like, and Black people, Indigenous people, Latinx folks, that is something that happens, and it's not something that's like. It's not about taking a diversity class. It's ingrained into how healthcare is being taught at a basic level. And there's consequences for people at the end of the day. I think someone else had a hand up. Lynette?
Yes, I have mine. Thank you very much. As the person before me, the gentleman that just finished speaking, a lot of the doctors, a lot of the doctors won't prescribe Black people medications that they need, but they always want to prescribe something that they don't need. Now, I'm 75 years old. I don't take anything. I don't have any health problems of any kind, but I can get anything that I want from my doctor if I took anything. On the other hand, my daughter has asked for Fentanyl because I told her to ask for it. That's the only thing that gets rid of a headache in just seconds. And they wouldn't give it to her because the doctor told her that no, because you may get addicted to this, blah, 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 blah. But they have different standards. Now I noticed, because I used to work at St. Mary's in the psych ward and on regular medical floors, but I noticed when white people go to the doctors, they seem to be able to have access to whatever drugs they want. When they go in the emergency room, they will prescribe whatever it is, a drug, and usually that's what they try to give me, as I've gone through different phases in my life. But like I said, I don't take anything, I don't want anything, but they have different standards for different people, Black versus white. It's a Black and white world, so I'm always talking about Black and white. And I have pointed that out to the doctor, and of course, she can't say much because she knows it's true. I pay attention. I'm very awake. I'm my own advocate. My husband and I used to go to the doctors and the hospitals together, and we would advocate for each other. But I'm advocating for myself now. But it is strange that, as the man just said a few moments ago, that the doctors know you. They have your history. They know that if they've been treating you for years, that is not likely that you want drugs to become an addict, but yet and still they will give you what you shouldn't have. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, something should be done about that, as well as them showing biases with different patients.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't know, I'm just going to move to the next slide unless there's one more question that people have.
We saw James, I believe James had his hand up.
Yes, I did have my hand up, but I feel as if I'm going to let you continue because my question, I feel like it should be like for overall Q&A, like at the end.
Cool. Thank you, James.
All right.
Then I think Francois also has their hand up.
Good evening again. I'm not echoing, am I?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Wow. So my mom and I are messaging, but she's on here as well. And I just want to share something really briefly. Sorry if I get a little emotional. This whole subject is like really touching for me. So I'm in my late 40s, I'm over 45. At the age of 16, I'm just gonna go real brief, real quick. At the age of 16, I ended up with pancreatitis, which ended up being chronic pancreatitis. So that's something I've dealt with for the last 30 years. I was always, in all honesty, my parents used drugs, both parents, so I experienced that. I've also worked in a homeless shelter, property management in the SROs down in San Francisco up until just recently, 4 months ago, due to my health. But I got myself off of opiates because I was against them to begin with. They started me on them very young. And I had to fight to get off, which is so weird. But I just want to share this. I don't know the gentleman, I don't know his name, who spoke about how hard it is to get pain medicine. It is extremely hard. But here's the thing about that. I recently got sick. I've been having some heart issues, and I went to emergency. My mom actually met me there, and I didn't want pain medicine. It took a lot for me to get off. My doctor wasn't willing to take me off of opiates, and I was on 23 different medicines. But let me just share this. I was on 150 milligram fentanyl patch on my back, and my breakthrough medicines were oxycodone and OxyContin, but they were also giving me, due to my feeding tube at home 24/7, I was also on morphine. That's a lot of medicine. And I have kids, so I was sleeping a lot, which then made me depressed and that whole thing. It's hard to get those pain medicines, but also, like, I understand how much they're needed. It got to the point to where even when I wasn't in pain, I would need to take it just so I wouldn't get sick. So to finally be able to find a doctor that was willing to help me get off at a totally different hospital in a totally different city was helpful. It was very helpful. But yes, I recently went to emergency and they pushed to give me a pain medicine, and I wasn't there for pain. I was there because I was having chest pains. And it got to the point to where I started recording. And then the doctor wouldn't come back after we kind of went back and forth, because I'm saying I don't want pain medicine and you're pushing it on me. But when I was actually on pain medicine, it was hard for me to get it. It's so weird and it's so strange. But here's something that I've learned from all the hospitalizations and different doctors over the years, specialists. It is very hard for Blacks to get any kind of pain medicine. Whether you have and a lot of us have different illnesses, and it depends on who you go to. It depends on who, but just know this. I'm just going to cut it short because I feel like I'm all over the place because there's so many things going through my mind about this conversation. Interview your doctor. Don't just take a doctor because they're assigned to you or because you meet them for the first time. Interview the doctor. Let them know what it is you need and see if they're willing to work with you before you just take that doctor on. Make sure it's someone who's willing to listen to you. And they clearly understand, I'm not here because I'm trying to get high. I'm here because I'm in pain and I need help. And that's just where I'm going to end it there. But
thank you. I'm sorry about all the health issues you've been going through. I have Jassy. Do you want to add something?
Yes. Just to add to what you were saying, I agree. Like, it's been a time, for an example, where one of my friends went to the hospital and they had an infection in their brain. And like the doctor just tried to send them home with pain medicine instead of actually giving them something for the infection. So my thing is like, what kind of teaching is that? Like, how do you send somebody home with an infection, pain medicine for the infection to grow? So yeah, I agree though. Like, doctors definitely do need to be interviewed and questioned, and just because they're a doctor don't mean what they're saying is legit, because I've ran into a lot of situations like that as well, which makes me very skeptical of the healthcare system.
I think everyone should be skeptical of the healthcare system. That's true. I know I see a lot of hands, but I'm gonna try to move on to the next so we can get through everything, and then we're gonna come back to this when we do the Q&A. How about that? So there's a lot of hands on this chat, but we're gonna bring it up when we go back to the Q&A. Okay. So I'm gonna go now back to fentanyl specifically because I want to just to like go through like some of the myths around fentanyl and a little bit about what is happening, what it is, right? So fentanyl is a medication. It's a pain medication for the most part. It is synthetic. It's a synthetic opiate. It's part of the opiate family. So things like, some people already know this, like morphine is part of that. Oxycodone is part of that. Percocets are part of that. There's different strengths, but they're part of the same family. And what that just means is that an opiate is just a medication that it has a certain effect on your body. The main effect is to reduce pain by affecting your brain. So they'll like make you feel really relaxed. A lot of people will feel, some people feel a sense of euphoria when they take them. They feel like really good because for some people it will take the stress away. It will take a lot of the weight. So when we talk about, and they're also at the same time, they can cause a lot of dependency. Like you have to, if you use them for too long, some medications do this, you'll end up, you're gonna have to use it every day unless you cut out slowly or get a substitution plan. And opiates are a big one. It's really quickly to get like addicted to them, to use them to depend on them. And when I mean dependent on them, you're dependent physically, like your body will get sick. Like some people will start vomiting and having diarrhea, and their body will, like their pain tolerance has decreased because the more opiates you take, the less your pain tolerance is possible, the less pain tolerance you have. And that's something that's going to happen when you use opiates on a regular basis. The second thing that's going to happen is that it's going to, if you don't use it every day, you're going to like, all your pain is going to come back. You're going to feel sick. You're going to start shaking. It can cause like other side effects. And that's usually what's called like when people are dope sick or experiencing withdrawal. And the thing with opiates is it's pretty fast for people to do that. And fentanyl is part of the family. So as I said, they affect the brain, they make you feel good, they relax the pain, they also make you constipated a lot of the time. And then the last thing that opiates can do is they reduce your ability to breathe. So they slow down your breathing. That's one of the biggest things that opiates, every opiate will do this. And depending on how much you have in your body, it can lead to you stopping to breathe. So when you, for example, we're talking about hospitals, people do get fentanyl in the hospitals, people do get other opiates in the hospital, but anytime someone gets opiates in the hospital, they're always going to have naloxone next to the bedside because people can overdose even with a doctor, even with nurses, even with a prescription, because overdoses are not just about the drug, they're not just about how much you're taking, it's also about what's going on in your body. Like if your health is doing well, if you're eating, if you've slept, how your mental health is doing, all that will come into effect. So when fentanyl has been in the market for a long time. It's a medication. It's been in clinical settings for decades. It's been used in clinical settings for birth, for cancer pain. But what is happening is that, and it's it's like 80 to 100 times stronger than morphine, 50 times stronger than heroin. And one of the things that someone brought up earlier is that we don't know if it's being mixed in the supply or it's happening unintentionally. Some people do want to use fentanyl. People are seeking fentanyl to use. Like people are seeking heroin to use in the past. And some people are seeking other things because it's a high that people are getting specific. At the same time that is happening, there's also there's like cross-contamination in the supply, which means that, like, for example, if you have a dealer, the dealer might not even know this. It might happen like many layers up, where they might be mixing like different kinds of drugs in a room. And then you need so little fentanyl, and you can see it on the chart on the screen, to overdose, that you just need a tiny amount. That's one thing that is happening. And then there's parts of the country and in parts of Canada where people are actually mixing the pills. So they're called press pills, where they're like, or like powder, where that is intentionally being sold as fentanyl mixed with other things. And then we're also seeing it show up in cocaine, we're seeing it show up in meth, we're seeing it show up in speed and other drugs. And that is something that's happening and we're not seeing it so much based on the testing that's being done of drugs in San Francisco is much less compared to the rest of the country. It has happened a few times, but it's not a common occurrence as we think it is. Francois, do you have a question? No? Okay.
I see Mr. Bowles. Is it a Martin Bowles? Okay, no worries.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. You had a question?
No, I had my hand up earlier and I forgot to take it down. So
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe if everyone who has a hand up want to take it down, because there we go. Now we're good.
Okay,
Thank
got
you.
it.
The second thing about fentanyl, yes, it is responsible for the current overdose crisis. So what is happening a lot, like for example, where I was in the East Coast, what we saw a lot is that during the pandemic, the borders closed and there was no drugs. The drug supply just dried out, and then suddenly fentanyl appeared. One of the reasons for that is because it's very cheap to make. It's not very expensive to make. It's very easy. You need so little to have a big high. So people were like using that. We've seen that that's how it happened where I was. It's happened for different reasons in different parts of the country, but it's a very strong drug and it's not hard to make because it's synthetic. But it also has to do with like the overdose crisis that we're seeing in the United States also has to do with lack of resources, right? With the criminalization of people who use drugs. So people who use drugs are going to jail, they're not actually getting the support that they need. And then there's not a lot of resources for that. We talked a lot about how doctors were pushing the drugs on people, and then people ended up with nothing because it cut them off. The other thing is that fentanyl is present in San Francisco right now, and it's coming in a powder form that can be injected, smoked, or snorted. It is something that, and when I say smoke, it means that it's being used like in a foil or like in a pipe. And next slide, I'll explain why that is important. And it also has been found in other drugs. Not as much as we think it is, but it's still present in other drugs. I do want to emphasize that some people are intentionally looking to get high from fentanyl. That's what they're looking to buy. And some people may not even know what they're buying. The little screen, the one thing I want to mention about opiates is that one of the things that is happening is that historically a lot of people were used to using heroin, for example. Like people will use heroin. It's an opiate, very similar to fentanyl, but it's not as strong, right? So when fentanyl started showing up in the supply, it was so much stronger that you needed so little, and people were not used to, like, they were like, I'm going to use my regular dose that I always use. And suddenly they were dropping. Like, that's how I lost a lot of people, because people had historically been using a certain amount, and suddenly the strength of the supply changed, and fentanyl showed up, and people started dying because they didn't know they needed to use less. They didn't know how to adapt. The community were not quite ready for what was coming, and that is something that, like, I think with San Francisco, fentanyl has been here since 2018, and we saw a lot of people die, but we are the community, people who use drugs are like sort of like responding to it, being like, okay, there's things that we can do to respond to this, right? People don't have to die even if they choose to use fentanyl. Kevin is asking, do doctors get paid for prescribing particular meds? In this country, I think so. In the United States, I think in a lot of parts of the world, no. It seems like in the United States, the pharmaceutical companies have a lot of power in terms of how they decide to prescribe, or they might. That's not something that happened in opiates. I think there's a documentary about it that came out. How the people who made OxyContin were like giving people bonuses, or like doctors bonuses for things. You can look it up. I think it's on Netflix or one of the streaming sites or Prime. But what are some of the myths around fentanyl? So one of the things is that fentanyl is not naloxone resistant. You can use naloxone to reverse an overdose from fentanyl. Naloxone is a medication that we use in the community. That's like a community-based response to reverse overdoses, and naloxone does work on fentanyl. You cannot overdose from touching fentanyl or standing next to someone who's using it. Now, there's a lot of media around this because there's been a lot of police forces who claim they've overdosed from fentanyl from touching it or being around it. You can't. Physically, you can't. Like, fentanyl needs to be absorbed. One, it doesn't get absorbed through the stomach very well. And two, if you put it on your skin, you need something. That's why you have patches, because you need something in between, like a medium, like something to help it go into the skin. By itself, nothing will happen. I can say this from evidence. I can say this from like science. You can't from touching it, overdose, or even get high from it. When somebody's smoking next to you with like the foil or the pipe, it's really hard for you to get high next to that. You need to be in like a contained tiny room, like hot box room. You need to have like a lot of, because the air will push it away. You can like overdose or get high from smoking it in weed. So if you put fentanyl weed and you try to smoke it as a joint, you cannot get high from that, because the moment you burn fentanyl, it stops having any effect on your body. So when people talk about the weed being laced, If you're smoking it like in a joint and you burn it, the moment you burn it, it stops having any effect. And that's the thing with fentanyl. So those are a couple of just common myths that I hear a lot. And then lastly, that people are intentionally wanting to buy it. Like that's true. It's some people do want to get high. Do people have any other myths they hear about fentanyl that they want to ask about? Or things they've heard they're not sure about, or they want to just confirm that if it's true or not? This is the time, please ask me.
Well, I heard that fentanyl was flooding all of the communities that had low income or homelessness because they were trying to get rid of everybody. So is that a myth?
That is a myth because we can't confirm that's true. Because fentanyl is everywhere. Like it's in the East Coast, it's in Canada, it was everywhere in Canada. It was in the party scenes, it was in the non-party scenes. It's just something that's being mixed in the supply. I think the difference is that that I think what is happening with sort of things like that is that in poor neighborhoods where people are like don't have homes, there's other factors as well that make it easier for people to overdose. One example, for example, is that I don't know if people know this, but like a lot of the time when people are having like psychotic breaks or like they're having psychosis from using meth, it's not because of the meth per se, it's because they haven't slept in 5 days. Try not sleeping for 5 days in a row and not eating. You're going to feel loopy. You might also be having a psychosis. Same thing happens with fentanyl. In communities where people are not being able to sleep very well, they're not able to get homes, they're not able to eat, they're not able to, like they feel unsafe all the time. There might be some mental health issues or violence. Those are all things that exist in spaces where people like, it's not to say that people who are homeless bring those things in, but those things exist because people don't get enough food. They don't have the money to buy it. They don't have, and those will also affect the way that people will overdose. Jessie, you had a question?
Why do some people die the first time they hit it and others don't?
Yes. So that has to do more with, fentanyl, the way that it works is that it's really bad at mixing with other things. And there's sometimes just pockets that exist where like there's more of it in a corner of the bag and that person that's what might be hit. The strength of it. It might also have to do with like maybe someone has a really bad liver or a really bad like their digestive system, their like circulatory system is not very good. Like there might be some health issues that make them at higher risk. In some other cases, it might be that there's something else in their system. So they might have been taking a prescription medication that day, or they might have taken like a lot of alcohol. Any other factor, for example, if you use an upper like a cocaine, crack, speed, and then you take a downer like fentanyl, the upper, what it'll do is it'll make your heart beat faster, asking your body for more oxygen. But when you take a downer, you cannot breathe more. You're slowing your breathing down, so you're not getting enough oxygen in. There's a higher chance of overdose through that. So sometimes when people do overdose, it has to do with like the strength of the supply, which is unpredictable. It might be that they might just hit one time. For example, in Eastern Canada, what I saw a lot was that there was something called carfentanil, which is like 10,000 times stronger than morphine. It's something that is not here yet, but it was in the East Coast. And I saw someone, he was talking to me, had a needle in his arm, was literally half through a sentence and he turned blue. And it was because in that instance, the batch he had was really, really, really strong. But we were there, we responded, reverse overdose, he was fine. And that is something that we see a lot, that sometimes it has to do with all those other factors that come to play. Yeah, Jassy, you had another question?
No, that was all. Thank you.
Okay.
I see that Kevin O'Neill in the chat has a question.
Yeah.
It was, do doctors get paid for prescribing particular meds?
Oh, I think I answered this earlier. I said that sometimes it does happen in the United States because it is a privatized healthcare system. When you do have it's not supposed to happen, but I think the pharmaceutical companies have a lot of power in this country to do things like this. Like the fact that there's ads about prescription medication, which for me makes no sense, or that there's like the same medication can be sold generic and non-generic. That's a way that they're making money, and I'm pretty sure they're doing that also with certain doctors. I don't know how that works specifically. I think that's like different. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Anything else about fentanyl?
I actually do have just one question about this. So,
Yeah.
and a yes or no would suffice for sure. So is fentanyl used medically or no?
Yes, it is.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'm done. I should have.
That's okay. It is used in hospitals. The first time I encountered fentanyl was in nursing school. It was before the opioid crisis started or showed up in the supply. It gets given for cancer. It gets given sometimes it gets given to people to knock them out. And then they revive them with Narcan. Sometimes it gets used for birth. Like when people are giving birth, they all use
That's
fentanyl
very
as well.
interesting.
Yeah. So that's usually like where it comes. That's what I'm saying. Like it's been it's been a prescription medication for decades. And then around 2018 started showing up in the supply.
So sorry to cut you off. I do have one more
That's good.
question. So
Go for it.
what would separate it? Is it the death rate that separates fentanyl from something like codeine?
It's the strength. So you need, I think, let me go back to the slide that I had before. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. This is why I'm going to explain the slide. So I don't know if you can see on the screen, you can see the lethal dose for all of the drugs that are on the screen. Codeine is weaker than morphine.
Okay.
So to die from morphine, you need like a pea-sized amount of the drug. To die from heroin, you need like the size of a sunflower seed. To die from fentanyl, you need a sesame seed.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and and then it goes even stronger. Like if you need like carfentanil, I was mentioning this in the East Coast, but not here yet, you need like half a grain of salt. You need so little for it to be lethal. And
I'm sorry, but
No,
I grew up in a church, and they say faith of a mustard seed. So you know how small a mustard seed is, and it's just like that's all they need to die from fentanyl. So that's crazy. Thank you for that. And
no
we got we got Marvelous and Miss Lynette next for questions here.
Hello. I mean, this is kind of on the point, but off the point. In the 80s, when we sold a little bit of crack, you could have 6 grams and go do 10 years in the feds. Now you got a group of people who are selling fentanyl right across the street from the federal building. And I haven't paid close attention how they're addressing this. Have you heard anything on how, because I know you have to be aware. You could just see them selling fentanyl right across the street from the federal building. Like
so
literally.
One thing, yeah. And that's true. I mean, the thing that I will tell you about that is I think I'm a harm reductionist, and I'm someone who has friends who use drugs, has friends who also sell drugs. And I think the issue is not with that. I think the issue is a bigger issue about has to do with systemic issues at play. People are going to use drugs. And if you keep pushing them away, they're going to get into more and more dangerous situations. You end up having people, like one thing that's been happening that people don't even realize is part of the efforts to clean the Tenderloin have been pushing a lot of the dealers out of the Tenderloin, but now they're encountering other gangs that are in the mission, and then just creating a lot of conflict. And then what's ends up happening is that people who do depend on drugs right now because of addiction, because of pain, because they don't have access to resources, end up losing their access to a supply, and they get really sick, and they're in a lot of pain, and there's not enough resources yet for people to stop. And another thing is that people need to be able to, like, I'm not saying that like that's just one thing, but I think there's like bigger issues at play that are just a dealer selling on the corner. Like people are going to use drugs. Let's figure out a way for people not to die from that. One of them is community responses, giving more money to harm reduction programs, giving more money to like mental health, figuring out how to do a community response rather than just, like that's addressing that, because people are still going to be using. Right?
No,
like,
they were using in the 80s, and they still kept busting blacks. They didn't care about nothing when it came to the blacks. Now they're having all these kind of, I don't know, being a little more gentle to drug dealers.
I think because it didn't work in the 80s, right? Like the tough on crime thing is like, has it actually like made it's actually for like society to feel better about the situation, but it's not actually addressing the people who use drugs, right? Like that is still happening.
Man, they had to come to our houses. They didn't. We wasn't right across the street from the federal building with the most highly regulated drug or highlighted drug in America right now. I don't know. I don't have an answer.
No, me neither. I just, yeah.
Thank you, Marvelous. We have Lynette Mackey.
Hi. So I have one question though. Is there any way to determine, because there's been so many deaths with our youth with the fentanyl and the weed? Is there any way that how can you determine if there's fentanyl in the weed beforehand? Is there anything different so that we can educate these youth? We're losing a lot of youth because of the fentanyl and the weed. And I just want to know, is there any way to determine it's in there before they smoke it?
So a couple of things, and this is something that the moment you smoke weed, and if it has fentanyl in it, the moment you burn the joint, the combustion, the moment of the fire touching the weed and the fentanyl, you cannot get high from that. There's no way. It's impossible. It's like scientifically impossible. It's like, I don't even know how to compare it to, like if you try to get high from a cookie by burning it, you can't get high. That's the thing. So what could be happening is that people are vaporizing it. So they're using it as like a vapor. So maybe they're smoking a pipe. So they're not actually burning the substance. That could be a way that can be getting into a system. Like so, but in a joint, there's scientifically it's not possible. Like that you can't get high from burning fentanyl.
So real quick question.
Breathing at it. Yeah.
So you can so when it comes to fentanyl, you have to heat it up to smoke it. But if you put combustion, if you put fire flame to it, it's a different kind of chemical reaction.
Yeah, it changes the ability for the body to absorb it. It kills the proteins and the molecules that let your body take it in.
So I've heard of several people right here in the Fillmore that were smoking weed and they smoked it had fentanyl in it and they died. How did that happen?
Maybe they took something else. Maybe there was, because this is the thing. It's like it's. I don't know if you were there or not when that happened. All the stories get retold. Maybe they already had taken some fentanyl before. Maybe there were some in. Maybe they were smoking it different. Like they're not actually like burning it. That's another way that it can happen, right? Like if they're like injecting it, if they're like using a pipe, for example. If you use a pipe, you're not actually burning the weed. You're just heating it up. That's the only thing I can tell you, because I know for a fact this is like just a science fact. You can't.
Very interesting information. Thank you.
And so also too, that kind of brings us back to the point of debunking the myths, because that's something that you believed. And it sounds about right too, because I heard it too. So that's crazy to hear that that's not the truth, because if that's the story that's being told, then
or something else. This is the other thing, like it could be something else, right? Like we're not testing that weed after someone died from it, right? So it could be that there's something else in that weed that can make you high and that can make you overdose. Like fentanyl is not the only thing that's killing people, right? Like when overdoses happen, people can overdose from cocaine and die. People can overdose from meth and die. People can overdose from speed and die. There's a lot of other drugs also. There's things right now in the supply. There's something called psilocybin that's in the East Coast. We haven't seen it yet here. Psilocybin is a tranquilizer. It's an animal tranquilizer being mixed in supply in the East Coast. And when you try to respond to it with naloxone, it doesn't work. There's things like benzos, so Xanax, like the pills that are blues, those have Xanax in them. They have benzos in them. Benzos, when it gets mixed with fentanyl, you can't really respond. You can respond to the opiate that's in their body, but you cannot respond to the Xanax, and people can still die. Like I had people, this is something that was really prevalent where I was, where you had people who were overdosing, you gave them naloxone, you gave them oxygen, and they're back, they woke up, and then they started falling asleep again, and then they stopped breathing. And then you have to sit with them for 2 hours, shaking them to make sure they would breathe, just so they could breathe. But you couldn't put them on a mask because they were not actually, you could wake them up. Naloxone wasn't doing anything. And if there was not someone next to them, literally just being like, hey buddy, breathe, they wouldn't breathe and they would just stop breathing and die. And that's something that is happening when you have an unpredictable supply too.
Thank you.
So, oh, sorry. One
No,
other
go for
question.
it.
How is it? So how is fentanyl rendered medically?
So there's a couple ways you can give it intravenously through like an IV. A lot of the times that's the fastest way to get into the body. There can be a shot so into the muscle or subcutaneous. And then there's also patches that exist. So you have a patch that gets put into the body.
So would that mean that a person could get high from the vapor and or the liquid?
So you can get high from injecting the liquid. You have to inject it first.
Oh, you have to inject it into your veins.
Your vein or your muscle.
Interesting. Okay.
Because your stomach is really good at killing stuff. There's like really strong acid there, and fentanyl doesn't do well with that. And two, the vapor, because you can get absorbed through the mucus. Usually you need a mucus membrane. So that's why people use it in a vapor. You guys give me 1 second. There's someone ringing the doorbell, and I think my
okay,
yeah. Open the door. 1 second. Sorry about that.
Take your time. Take your time.
Also,
but you know what's crazy is that I've heard more than one time from multiple people. My sister died of fentanyl in the weed. The rumor is over here in Fillmore that youngsters are dying from fentanyl in the weed. So if you're saying that you cannot smoke it, then I'm just really baffled on this one because I've heard it on so many
I'm baffled
times.
about that too.
I've heard it on so many times and so many different levels from so many different people.
No, and that's why we're here to get all the rumors out the way. This is debunking the myth of fentanyl. So I'm so glad we're here to ask these questions.
Is there a government conspiracy?
No,
so
no,
what
no.
if that's the case, is that if that's the case, are people that are overdosing from fentanyl overdosing from other means other than marijuana, and it's just easy to say that it was marijuana? Well, it sounds better to say marijuana than to say cocaine, to say they were sniffing it, or to say they were shooting it. Is that what that is?
It could be that. It could be that there's so much stigma around drug use that people want to be like, because weed is legal, people can smoke weed anywhere. They're trying to be like, there's also something about the privatization of weed, which is great that it's legal. I love it. But it also means that big companies are taking over, and it's not being sold by like people in the neighborhoods, in the communities anymore. I cannot tell you where the rumor started or why. It's very, I know I've heard it so many times. That's why I put it on one of the slides, because I have. And I know that scientifically it's just not possible unless you make it into a vapor. And then, yes, you can. But if you're smoking it as a joint, there's just no way. Like scientifically, it's just not.
You wasting it. You basically wasting it.
Yeah, you are. That's what's happening. So, and that's something that like people don't know. Yeah. Go ahead.
There's another question in the Q&A. It says from E. Martin, it says, but if it's in your system, what difference does it make power form of weed? Did I ask that right?
Yeah. So when you smoke weed, you get high. So smoking weed, you get high because you burn it. The moment you burn it, it changes the composition of the substance, and it makes you get high from it, right? You have to like basically burn it, or you cook it into something red, and that is like it's a chemical change that happens. Fentanyl is another kind of molecule. It's not the same as weed. So when you put it into your body, it has to be in a certain way, otherwise you kill the proteins and the sort of molecules that make it possible for your body to absorb, because we need certain things in our body to absorb things, right? Like if I put a pen in my skin, because it's plastic, the pen is not going to go into my body. Same thing happens with drugs. Like there needs to be something there. So when you put it into your body through vapors, what it's doing is that it's changing the composition of it, so it can go through the nose or the mouth or the membrane of the mouth, because the cells in our mouth are different than the cells in our skin. When we touch it, that's why fentanyl you have to like put in a patch, you have to touch it, you have to put it into the body through an injection. The easiest way that people have found is through smoking it. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, we got one more question. It's actually a call from Marvelous, but he has somebody that's online that he wants to ask a question. Go ahead, Marv.
Not me. I don't know who that is. I think it's Rico, and I think when I sent him the link, he linked it as me. Is that?
Oh, okay.
Are you there, Rico? I don't know, because I keep seeing my name come up, but that's not me answering the questions. I wonder how that, it must have happened like that. But I need to be unmuted. So the person, Marvelous Lucas, I think you have to unmute him.
Yeah, there's a new one. So you have to unmute it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you go.
Yes.
Oh, hey everyone. Hey everyone, I'm Rico. I had a quick question about the weed smoking. Because I know from years of smoking and putting things inside of marijuana when I was a lot younger. I don't smoke anymore, but when I was younger. So when you smoking marijuana, right, and the light hits the actual and you're firing up and you inhale, there's like an inch of heat that is actually going into the actual joint or blunt that actually isn't touching the weed, that is actually creating a certain number of degrees in terms of heat that possibly can create or cause fentanyl to vaporize. Is that accurate or no? Because I know that there's an inch or less than half or maybe half an inch that when you're inhaling, the cherry is creating a heat that actually goes through the blunt that the way that you're inhaling. So it makes sense that it can cause the vapor and cause it to harm you, right?
Yes, there's a chance of that happening, but it's very small. Like it's like just like the for the amount that you needed of the vapor to get like to overdose. Like the amounts that I put in the last slide about how much you need to overdose, those are all amounts for injection use. Like for like if you're injecting into a vein directly. I'm gonna have to look into specifically your question. What I've read and what I've seen and what I've heard from the fentanyl when you do end up smoking it in a joint is that usually the moment the fire hits it, there's not enough time or space for it to actually like hit your body in a way that you're gonna get high. But I might be wrong because that's a pretty good point.
And also just to add on to the last gentleman that spoke here, I want to say that we're going to put Andrea's information in the chat because these are all great questions. So you guys can have access to her. This is what it's about. You guys, being able to have the resource. And this is all great questions. And I'm glad that we could create a space so we could have this conversation. Thank you. So I'll put that in the chat now.
Yes. Is there any other questions?
Oh, you know what? Did you put up a slide of what it looked like?
I put the slide of, this is a slide of what it looks like.
Oh yeah, let me see. Let me zoom in on that. I can't see.
No, this is just what a sesame looks like.
Oh, my bad.
The fentanyl just looks like a white powder, but
oh, just a little white powder.
That's what it looks like here. Where I was, it came in every single color of the rainbow. We would have batches that were pink, that were red, that were green, yellow.
It wasn't like a pill?
No. It can also be in a pill form.
Oh, okay.
It's a powder. So they press the powder into a pill. Then
so they could turn that. So they could turn that into a rock then.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
So it can look also like a rock. A lot of time when rocks look like for crack or like meth, you have in a rock form. What ends up happening is the fentanyl doesn't get into the rock, but it gets around it. So like the powders, if it's powdery or anything like that, it might be around.
Muy interesante.
I think the only thing I want to say is like I think the thing with the weed, I'm gonna look into the way that you brought it up because that is actually a good point. I just know that if you burn it, the moment you burn the fentanyl, it won't have an effect on your body. That I know for a fact. But I think there's something to be said about what happens when the vapor gets started, when the hot air goes through it. if that's enough for the fentanyl to actually have an effect. Because normally you do need like an open flame on a pipe, or like, I don't know if you've seen people when they're smoking fentanyl, then you need like a pipe. They're like, they go like with a torch, or you need like aluminum foil, and you need to torch it. Like you need to get really, really hot. Whether or not the chair is hot enough for that to happen, I don't know, but I can look into it.
So it sounds like you can even smoke fentanyl out of a damn dab thingy.
Yeah, as long as
Wait.
you don't burn it directly.
I want to share something too.
Yeah,
I
go for it.
just Googled, can you die from smoking weed with fentanyl in it? And it says marijuana laced with fentanyl, consuming it as it can be smoked as a drug. As little as a grain of fentanyl is enough to harm and cause you to overdose.
Oh, that's a lie. That article a lie. That article is a lie.
So I don't know. There's another article. Fentanyl laced with weed has caused overdose multiple times. I mean, whatever, a devastated amount in US. Okay. So these things are contradictory, because I've been hearing it so much.
That's right. Okay.
That
Yeah,
for
it
me,
is.
for me, this conversation the laced fentanyl is a real big topic, because that's what's happening in our community. So we need, I'm saying you're right, but I'm saying everything you read about saying you could die from laced fentanyl laced, it increased. There's a million articles. I'm looking at them.
No, I believe you. I think the one thing I will say though, there's also a million articles about how cops are touching fentanyl and they're dying, and they're all having overdoses, which is not possible. Like when you overdose, you can't Narcan yourself. And when you see what an overdose looks like, usually people fall asleep and they stop breathing, they stop responding to you. That's what an overdose looks like for fentanyl, for opiates. All of the reports that come out are people having like panic attacks. So I'm not saying that it's not true. I just want to be a bit critical of the who is reporting it, who's writing that. Like, is it a media article? A lot of the media will.
I don't know, but it's
like,
1,000
make
of
it
them.
bigger.
So it's 1,000 of them. So I just wanted.
No, I trust you. I
Excuse me, can I say something?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry, can I say something? So there's a lot of stuff on the internet. You have to look at the source. Go to a medical journal, go to there's like these medical websites that you can go to. Look at the information that they have.
Here's something. Live 5 News, Channel 5 News. Police warn of laced marijuana after drug overdoses. Stuff like that. That's all I'm saying. If it's not,
it's just the police is not your best source for drug news. I will be honest.
Okay, so basically what I'm saying is go talk to a pharmacist, go to where the pharmacists go, put information, and the doctors, they're dealing with it. So, or the people who create it, because they make reports on this stuff. I don't know exactly what's there, but I would go to a more reputable, verifiable.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I just see a million of them.
People
all different kind of medical
speak with authority on these drugs. We can speak with the information that's given to us, just like this young lady is, but let's go to the doctors, to the pharmaceutical companies. What are they saying about the drug and its capabilities?
And the thing that I want to say is, like, the thing that I do know for a fact that is coming from science, as well as saying like some scientific journals, is that, and also because I am a nurse, I did study nursing and study pharmacology, is that I know that when you burn it, the moment it burns with fire, fentanyl cannot go into the body. That does not mean that, I think what someone else brought up, I think it was Rico, that maybe the cherry in the weed heats up the rest of the joint enough that the vapor that comes out will cause you to overdose. But I know one thing's a fact, is that the moment you burn it with fire, fentanyl cannot. That's why people don't burn it directly. They always use something else, right? That's one thing. The reason I said that the cops are not your best source, because a lot of time cops, one, they don't use drugs. They don't know what, they are usually basing it on not on science, they're basing it on like some like not correct information. Like this reports that we're hearing about drugs, about police officers overdosing from touching fentanyl. And then you read the report and you see that one, they're like, the last one that I saw was this woman who like was next to someone who was like, there was fentanyl around, and then she felt she was overdosing, and she drove herself to another police officer because she was overdosing, the report said, and then she narcaned herself. You cannot narc on yourself if you're overdosing. You're unresponsive. You cannot respond. Like I've seen it. You cannot wake that person up.
Oh, that's what she said.
Two, she could not have driven herself. And it sounds like because of the way she was describing it, like she was feeling like her heart rate was beating really fast. She was feeling like very anxious. That for me sounds more like a panic attack. An overdose or an opiate overdose or an overdose from fentanyl has very clear signs. One of them, unresponsive. And this is what I'm gonna, what I was gonna talk about. You're unresponsive. Like you cannot respond. You cannot be woken up. You try to wake up the person by calling their name, by yelling, by like trying to rub their chest. Nothing happens. So you cannot wake them up. Two, they stop breathing or they don't breathe enough. They're not getting enough oxygen in their body. So they're like either breathing normally, they're not really overdosing from opiates. They're overdosing maybe from something else. That doesn't mean they're not overdosing. It could be something else. But the signs for opiate overdose, and this is fentanyl overdose, unresponsive, and the second one is they're not breathing enough. And because they don't have enough oxygen, because they're not breathing enough, their lips are going to turn blue or purple or gray. Their skin will change. If you touch their skin is going to feel cold and clammy. You might hear like this gargle noise from the back of the throat. So another thing that happens specifically with fentanyl is that they might get like what's called a wooden chest. So it's like they get really rigid, like they get like almost like they're like every part of their body gets like contracted into like very rigid. You can't really like even open the mouth because it's like stuck together. And then the chest feels like when you touch it, it feels like wood. And an opiate overdose looks like that. That's what it looks like always. If there's other things going on, it might be there's something else mixed in that supply, right? But if someone were to overdose from just opiates, that's what it looks like. But if there's something else in the supply, and this is something that we talk a lot, like when I was talking about benzodope, which is like when you have benzos in the supply, then it's not just opiates. There's something else going on that we need to also address. So that's one of the things I just also wanted to talk about is that that's also something that's happening.
I'm glad that you brought that up, actually, because I don't know why in my brain I had the idea that at some point somebody will be able to tell you that they overdosing. Like what? No, if you overdosing, I'm basically supposed to be helping you at this point. If you overdosing, there is no you talking to me, telling me I'm overdosing. That's crazy. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like for opiates overdoses, for most drug overdoses, the person becomes unresponsive. If someone is overdosing from uppers, so from meth, cocaine, oh yeah, we're trying to keep track of time, sorry. Then it's gonna look differently, but opiates, they're not gonna respond to you. And this is, quickly I'm gonna go through the steps, and I encourage everyone to come to my trainings. I give trainings on how to respond to an overdose, and we practice on a mannequin.
Do you give certificates?
We don't, but we can figure. If you need it for something specific, we can figure it out.
We can figure it out, James.
Yeah. So quickly the steps, so we can move to the next part. Quickly the steps, and I want to say thank you everyone for bringing up your questions. Also for challenging what I know. I think it's important to do that everywhere. And I'm not an expert, as I said. I just have a lot of experience with this, but I appreciate everyone in every way that you brought it up. So last thing I'm going to say, how to respond to an overdose. This is very fast. One, you want to know if they're high or they're overdosing. So you're going to assess them. When you find someone, you're going to be like, what does the skin color look like? Are they breathing? Can I wake them up? If you cannot wake them up by calling their name, by telling them you're going to knock on them, or by like giving them some stimulation, so rubbing the chest, pinching under the arm or next to the neck, some sort of like something that's going to cause pain but not damage them, and they cannot respond to you, then you're going to give them naloxone. You don't just give naloxone. You want to make sure they're actually overdosing, right? Then you're going to give naloxone first. You're going to give one dose. And if you have the nasal kind, you can give one dose up the nose. If you have the injection kind, you're giving one dose. You're going to inject it into the side of the muscle, so on the side of the leg or the arm. Then you're going to call 911. And you're just going to tell them, hey, someone's not responsive and not breathing. We don't tell you to say, we encourage you not to say that they're overdosing or they're getting naloxone. It's because we've heard too many reports from the community that the ambulance takes too long to show up, or they send the cops first. They actually don't send help. So we just tell them, what do you see? They're not responsive and they're not breathing. And that's all you have to tell them, location and then name. That's it. After you do that, you're gonna do rescue breathing. And this step is crucial because even if you don't have naloxone, this is like basic even mouth to mouth. And the reason for that is because the person's not breathing, you're trying to breathe to them. Your heart will still be beating, but they're not having oxygen. So even without naloxone, you can just give them, direct rescue breathing, which is 1 breath every 5 seconds. Make sure to pinch the nose. And then you're gonna reassess. And then if you have the person, you're gonna be like, hey, they might wake up after 1 dose. Because you have to wait 3 to 5 minutes in between doses. If they don't wake up after 3 minutes, you give them a 2nd dose and you keep doing rescue breathing until the ambulance shows up. But I encourage you all to come to the training where I go through this in depth. And, oh yeah, this was, let's turn to the track time. Just quick tips on how to prevent overdoses. We've talked about this a lot. So one of them is like, know your tolerance. It takes only 3 days for you to go to tolerance. Know that the supply is changing. Always use less and use slow if you don't know what you have. Always carry naloxone with you. Make a plan and try not to use alone. A lot of people, most of the deaths are happening when people are alone. And this is where you can get naloxone if you want it. You can also get it from Booker T. They're one of our district sites now. And that's it. And now I'm gonna this is the link for the training, which I'm gonna put it on the chat.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, guys. This was so great. I really appreciate this. Thank you. So we're just going to have a little second here. We're going to take this off a share screen. And also everybody that's on the chat, we're going to send her information out as part of the package of you being here today, and a quick little Q&A. And also, so we're going to take you off of share screen, okay?
Yeah. Oh yes, I just stopped it.
Perfect.
I think you.
Oh, so we're going to stop sharing screens with you. Okay. Okay. Sorry, new share. Okay. So start video. Okay. Can you guys see us? Okay. Stop sharing. Perfect. All right. Hi, everybody. Can you guys view us? Okay. Perfect.
No.
Okay. Hi. So we are the wellness team. I am Lisa. This is Jazzy and Marvella's down here.
Period.
No, we appreciate you guys for being here. Like, this information was so vital, especially to the Black community. I don't know if you guys joined us at September 6th of last year. This is why we wanted to do this this town hall, because there were so many different rumors around fentanyl and what's going on. So we really wanted to get this town hall going just so we could give out the right information. And just having Andrea here, and we're going to share her information just for you guys to have that resource. And you guys can also come get Narcans from us as well, and fentanyl test strips. And we just wanted to take a moment of silence. If you guys are comfortable, go ahead. I'm going to let actually Jazzy do this part.
Hello. So the next thing that we about to do, if you have somebody who is struggling with drug addiction right now, and that could be across the board with any type of drug, or you have somebody that you have lost because of drugs, you can call their name out in this space right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to light this candle. It's red. Red represents the blood that we have lost, and it also represents the blood that's still pumping through the veins of those who are alive. So within these next 5 minutes, you can feel free to call out a name of a loved one, a friend, or somebody that you know. Kids, child, whoever it may be. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you can keep that to yourself.
And put it in the chat.
Yes. So I'm going to light the candle. And we're going to take this moment of silence. And for me, the name I'm going to call out is Jamar.
I'm gonna call out Jennifer.
Sister Paulette, my twins grandchildren's father died of fentanyl.
I'm gonna call out Carlos Ortega, friend of mine.
Maurice Bowles, my nephew.
Jennifer Estes, my sister.
I dedicate my tribute to all the lives.
And Klein out for Godman, Gal, Vlad, and Blair.
I'm calling out to mothers and fathers who are struggling with drug addiction right now in this moment and have children to raise.
I also want to claim his name was Joshua, the twins' father, Joshua.
I want to call out Rodney Logan. I want to call out Anthony.
So thank you guys for participating. And as we come out of this moment in silence, just know moving forward, create space for these people. Light a candle and just be silent. And allow yourself to be silent and to not think of anything else and to channel that energy into love, into healing for those who are struggling, because it's real and it's tearing down our communities. And so the more energy and the love that we put into it, it does make a difference. And we as the wellness team at Booker T would like to create more spaces where people can heal and, go through this process. So thank you guys for participating. I'm gonna pass it to my colleagues.
Can you guys hear me? This was this work here, what we do with the wellness stabilization team here at Booker T. If you guys are going through crisis or mental health services or just in need and need support, we are your community home. We are here for you. Just reach out to us. We are not hard to find. We are located here at Booker T, Washington. And as we close this out, you guys could just drop your information in the chat. We will send you guys a link for your guys' gift card for participating. Also, you guys can come pick up your Safeway vouchers here at the front desk. And if anybody on the call would like to say a prayer as we close out this this beautiful informational session, you guys are more than welcome to. And if not, we can close out in prayer. So I'm opening the floor if anybody would like to say a prayer as we conclude this this virtual town hall tonight. Okay.
Dear Lord, thank you. Thank you for this session today. Thank you for those lives that were lost to fentanyl. Thank you, Lord. Lord, that touch those families that are suffering in silence, Lord. Have your way in their lives, Lord. Keep us all of those on the line that came through tonight, Lord. Thank you for being here tonight for me, Lord, for I have family members who died to fentanyl. And I just thank you, Lord, for being here tonight. Lord, keep us from all hurt, harm, and danger, Lord. In the name of Jesus, have your way in our lives, Lord. Touch us, Lord, and keep those families that are still suffering in silence, Lord. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen. All right, you guys, this concludes our service. Thank you so much, Ms. Paulette, for that. And we'll be in contact. Thank you, guys.
Drop
Thank you,
your
Andrea.
information so y'all get y'all gift cards.
Period. Hold on, I'm finna do
Thank
that
you.
right now.
No, we're gonna
Thank
leave
you
it
so
open.
much.
It don't close till 7:30. So
Oh, okay.
everybody got time. Put everything in there because we want to make sure y'all good. Also,
What you supposed to put in there?
your email.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Go
No,
ahead.
it's fine. Just put your email. And then see this right here? Everybody?
8049.
Yeah, we're gonna say.
Macaroni and cheese.
Who got some macaroni?
I'm done.
No, we'll send it on the email.
So we have an upcoming the State of Black Mental Health in San Francisco.
Okay.
It'll be another town hall that'll be located in person / Zoom as well. It's this Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30. And the conversation is just going to be based around people's state of their mental health, also coming out of coronavirus. How are people dealing with their mental health and how to get involved with SMIRF and how to get involved with Booker T. So
And what services are available for them?
yes, what services are available as well. So yeah, we got a lot of cool things coming up.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for dropping y'all stuff in the chat. Everybody should have their gift cards tomorrow. Our HR department will be sending them out.
Right.
I wanted to say thank you guys. I'm glad I took this serious and actually listened in and really took in the information. It was very, very informative. And I hope we do more stuff like this regarding, different things of this nature.
We will.
Thank you, Jane.
And also too, where we at? So you could come down with suggestions. Like also, if you want to lead anything too, like the floor is open. Just come with the idea and we'll see how we can incorporate it into our programming. Because basically what we want to do is let the community's voice lead the community.
As it should, period.
Exactly.
Thank you everyone also for listening today and for sharing and for like bringing up questions. That's great.
Andrea Figueroa, thank you.
Give it up for Figueroa. Come on.
Thank you.
Oh, y'all give it up.
I appreciate it, everyone.
Excellent meeting. Excellent.
Yeah, and if you have any more thoughts, I'm always down to talk.
And we're gonna have another Nod of Fentanyl coming around. We just don't have it on the calendar yet, but when we do have it on the calendar and we know what we're doing, everybody will get an invite / flyer. And if you wasn't at the first one, if you go to Booker T's, if you go to our Instagram, you can see our video.
I saved the chat, yeah. Perfect, and then make sure it's saved. I believe it's like this how you save it.
I thought you.
Y'all had said we can come down there right now and grab what? Oh, can y'all hear me?
Save chat right here.
So we close right now, but tomorrow you can come and pick up your $30 voucher.
Oh, okay, tomorrow. Okay.
Yes. And just call me.
Okay, well, I have fun. I'm gonna leave. Bye-bye, ladies. Bye, everyone in the
Bye.
chat. It was amazing.
Thank you for coming.
Mhm.
Who's banned the lipstick and glossy and glossy and all?
I gotta dip out. I gotta.
Okay, was everybody able to drop their email in the chat?
I feel like a few people left before you said the thing about the email.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I got 12 emails so far. So
Yeah, I think there was like 23 people.
so I need those other emails.
You might be able to see it on the Zoom. Sometimes you can see who registered.
Okay. That was a thank you.
Well, I'm gonna step out.
Okay. See you
Thank
later.
you, everyone. See you later,
Bye-bye,
y'all.
girl. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for
Have a good
debunking
night.
the myth.
Right. This is great.
Let me get
Loving
your
when people bring
phone,
things up. Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Mhm. I'm just trying to make sure everybody dropped their stuff. This chat is saved.